My name is Sam Hasselhoff. Just to reiterate, I'm a master's student in Dr. Mengjun Hu's lab, and my master's project is involved with understanding Neopest and how it's affecting the Mid-Atlantic region.
Sam, can you try to get the mic closer?
Here? Yeah. Thank you.
It's not, it doesn't go in the room anywhere.
Oh, I can talk louder. If it's difficult to hear, I can talk a little louder. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Less chewy, I guess.
I'd hate for you guys to have to hold off on lunch. I can definitely talk louder. So this past summer, like we are all aware, there was an outbreak at the nursery level where plug production had been contaminated with Neopest. So this also happened in Florida during the 2017 and 2019 growing season, and they lost approximately 200 acres of strawberry production to the disease. Neopest can infect the leaves and roots, stem, crown, and fruit of the strawberries, but most detrimentally is the root and crown infection because it will kill off your plants. I don't have any information on yield being affected yet, but that's something we're going to look into this spring and summer. Neopest spread is favored by warm temperatures and high humidity and long periods of wetness. So when the temperatures are around 77 to 86, it's really geared up and going. This is just a little graphic that I made to kind of show how quickly Neopest has spread through North America, but it is impacting other countries that grow strawberries. For instance, India. I recently saw a paper, Germany is having issues with this as well. So it is not just isolated to North America. This year, we had the pleasure, our pleasure, not your pleasure, to receive some samples from about 6 farms. 4 out of the 6 farms in the Maryland region were tested and confirmed to be Neopest. To confirm Neopest, you have to go through quite a few steps. So when I receive your samples, I process them and then plate them on a media that allows the pathogen to grow. And then I try to identify it morphologically, but as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different species of Neopest. So to find the aggressive species, I have to do some more DNA analysis and Sanger sequencing, and it can just take a little bit of time. I mainly saw Ruby June, Florida Brilliance, Chandler, and San Andrea cultivars to be positive for Neopest in our region, but the other plants seem to be dealing with some salt stress and perhaps drought stress. So I'm going to go over the disease cycle, and then I will go into a little more detail with trying to discern salt stress and pathogen stress on your plants. I created this infographic just to kind of show how Neopest will spread through your field. The primary source of inoculum is coming from the nurseries, as we've talked about at length here. And then once you're running overhead irrigation or you get a decent rain, spores that are latently on those plants can be spread throughout your field and infect other plants. The infection can mainly be discerned by these black dots, like Dr. Loers mentioned earlier, that Dr. Hu had kind of explained to her. So this is where spores are produced on your plant material and can be disseminated through the field, causing a secondary inoculum source that can just continue to infect the rest of your plants in the field. And this is some pictures from kind of fruit rot symptoms. So some disease symptoms that I have noticed and a lot of other extension agencies have put out papers regarding would be the leaf spots, also like Dr. Loers mentioned earlier. And primarily, I have seen a lot of necrotic areas like this on the leaves where I'm finding these black dots as well. And some of these plants have been confirmed to have Neopest after sequencing. I've also noticed that there is a good bit of stunting, and this is across all the cultivars in my trial right now. But the stunting really reduces the growth from plants that may or may not be infected with Neopest. I'm not sure if that is why these particular plants are stunted, but other extension agencies have also confirmed that stunting happens in plants that are infected with Neopest. A less visible symptom for growers would be the necrotic lesions in the crown, which is where you would get the stunting from and eventually plant death just due to the degradation of processing that the crown can do. You're having trouble picking up nutrients, so your plants can't grow as well, and they can't really stay as strong throughout the season. So maybe if you find a strawberry plant in your field that's looking like it's kind of struggling, and you're okay to lose the plant. If you want to investigate on your own, this is what a healthy crown would look like, and this is what a Neopest crown would look like, but I do want to emphasize that anthracnose crown rot will also cause dark lesions in the crown as well, and I believe Phytophthora can also do that. So you can't necessarily diagnose Neopest yourself, but you can see if the decrease in plant vigor is due to maybe something happening at the crown. So this would be where I'm going to talk about the abiotic stress that I noticed in some of the plant samples that we received this year. As you know, this fall was pretty dry. We were in a drought for a good period. And if you're not overhead irrigating constantly, this can lead to an accumulation of salt in your field, which will stress your plants out. Oddly enough, the stress symptoms of salinity look very close to some of the foliar pathogen symptoms that you'll see caused by Neopest. A good way to discern this would be that salt-stressed plants are consistently having these brown areas around the leaves, and all leaves on the plant are affected, whereas with pathogen stress, not every leaf here is being affected, and not every leaf has these necrotic lesions. And again, these necrotic lesions have these black dots, which are producing those spores, and these leaves don't have anything like that. They're just dry and curling up because of the drought and salt stress. I will hopefully have some pictures of my own from this growing season, but I got these from North Carolina State, and they kind of show symptoms that you can expect during fruit ripening and harvest. So again, stunted growth is an issue, and reddening of the leaves and kind of wilting at the stems are kind of clear signs that maybe something's wrong with your plant. It may be a pest, or it may be some kind of abiotic damage, but most likely if it's abiotic, you will see multiple plants that are not performing well, whereas if it's a pathogen, it may be sporadic where your plants are not doing well, if that makes sense. And then this beautiful graphic again, it's a real fan favorite. Again, this research was done in Indiana, and it was performed in the greenhouse, so the information that they found is helpful, but not exactly super pertinent when you are growing in the field setting, which is something that we are hoping to expand on with our field trial. So based off of the data that they collected, unfortunately, Ruby June, which is a favorite cultivar to grow here, is pretty susceptible. But thankfully, there are a good amount of cultivars that are still popular that have some level of tolerance. Unfortunately, there are no known resistant cultivars that I could say, hey, go ahead and plant that and you'll have a good year. Some management strategies that you can employ to kind of protect yourself during this period of uncertainty. First and foremost, I beg that you do not plant unhealthy looking plants. If your plugs come in or your bare roots come in and they're looking damaged, sad, wilted, or if they have some dark spots on them, I really urge you to not put them in the ground just to limit the possibility of further spreading this in your field. If you have access to it, get tolerant cultivars and less susceptible cultivars, but I know there can kind of be a bit of a race to get a certain amount of cultivars depending on the nursery that you're ordering from. But I've highlighted cultivars that I know are popular in this area and are less susceptible to neopests based on the research that came out of Indiana. Using cultivars like Flavorfest and Malwina, which are less susceptible, will give you a good buffer zone for having your plants die off and putting out symptoms that can further increase the inoculum in your field. Having good sanitation practices, which would be not working in the field after it's rained, or if you just recently ran your overhead irrigation, try to limit how much movement is happening in the field, because those spores can get in the soil. You're walking around, the soil's stuck to the bottom of your boot, and now you've just spread some more inoculum maybe further down your field than it would have gotten on its own. Field rotation has been very useful in limiting inoculum buildup in the field, but you can also utilize fumigation if that is possible for you. Some research in Florida actually found that fumigating your field will significantly reduce the survivability of Neopestalotiopsis and Calototricum, which causes anthracnose. Some of the best fumigants that they found, or the best performing fumigants that they used, were trade names Telone, K-PAM, and Tripic. But I am aware that not everybody has the ability to fumigate their fields. So if field rotation is an option, that would be your next best bet. There are no registered fungicides for Neopest right now, but some research out of Florida and with a spray program that was kind of disseminated from Bill Klein out of North Carolina State are both in agreement that Thyram has a really good job at controlling Neopest. Switch and Miravis Prime also do a good job at controlling Neopest. Bill Klein also recommended Tilt and Rime, and I know one nice thing about Rime is that you can run it through the drip irrigation. So that might help you kind of access the crown and root area and maybe give you a little more protection than just a foliar spray can do, because penetration is the #1 thing you want when it comes to your spraying. The more coverage you can get on the plant and the deeper you can get the fungicides to penetrate into the soil to access those lower parts of the plants is going to be better for you. Another research study in Mexico, which was also conducted in a greenhouse setting, showed that utilizing a pre-plant dip treatment has also significantly improved the survivability of plants after they were inoculated with Neopest. I don't know how accurate this is to the field just because this research came out of a greenhouse, but it was very interesting to see the difference in plant loss when there was no pre-dip treatment utilized and when there was a pre-dip treatment utilized. And thankfully, one of the fungicides I recently mentioned, Switch, can also be applied as a pre-plant dip, but I do understand that this is kind of a labor-intensive thing to do, so it's maybe not the best way to ensure protection for your plants, but it is an option. And then I just wanted to reiterate again that good spray coverage is really the best tool that you have in your toolbox right now. Me reiterating the same management strategies again. Please don't plant unhealthy plants and really limit the work in the field after it's rained or overhead irrigation has been going. So to get into my favorite part of the presentation, which would be my research that is ongoing here at the farm, we are in the first year of our field trial, and some questions that we were trying to understand would be, does a spray program in the fall provide any protection for your plants? Does it limit symptom development on plants, and can it maybe help the plants in the spring once they start putting on fruit? We're also interested in seeing if there's a cultivar effect with Neopest susceptibility, so we are testing 4 different cultivars this year, and I will be measuring Neopest levels in the lab using some laboratory techniques to see if the inoculum level or the pathogen level changes within the plant throughout the season. So one thing that we are interested in understanding is, does Neopest possibly lose some activity after a cold period? Does the winter happen to be our friend, and maybe this will reduce symptom development and pathogen proliferation once spring comes? We're also generally interested in understanding how Neopest functions in the Mid-Atlantic. A lot of research has been done on Neopest, but primarily in Florida and different growing regions. And we are also interested in seeing which cultivars maybe have susceptibility, more resistance, or tolerance. As we are in the first year of our field trial, I can't answer all of these questions right now, but based off of the disease assessments that I've done throughout the fall, we do have some preliminary data about the spray program and cultivars and how they are affected from Neopest. So the 4 cultivars we're utilizing are Goleta, Chandler, Malwina, and Keepsake. They were all inoculated with the same level of Neopest. And so far, based off of the assessments I've done, it shows that Keepsake has less symptomatic plants than other cultivars. We've also seen that a spray program does, in fact, limit the amount of symptoms that are present on plants. Most of the symptoms that I'm identifying are leaf spots or leaf death. So this information was pretty interesting to us, and we decided to kind of investigate further to see if there was maybe a cultivar effect with the spray program. And we found that planting a more tolerant variety in conjunction with the spray program actually leads to less symptom development on that tolerant cultivar. So some of these other cultivars that were listed as susceptible on the last graph, you can see that even with the spray program, which is the orange, they still have just as much symptom development, or I'm so sorry, the spray program is listed in blue. No spray is orange. They have similar amounts of symptom presence on the plants. So it seems like we're seeing the conjunction and the union between planting tolerant or resistant cultivars and employing a spray program should be useful in knocking the presence of symptoms down and maybe hopefully helping plant health throughout the season. That is the end of my talk. Here are some fun pictures of the work that we've done at the Y. And I would just really like to thank my advisor and the team here at the Y. If I did not have this support, I would not be able to do my research and in turn would not be able to help the growers. So thank you. Yes.
Sam, has anybody looked at the host range?
The host range, Neopestalotiopsis has a very large host range. It affects not only fruit crops, but some other like tree species and shrubs. It has a large host range, but it's kind of difficult because the taxonomy of Neopest is very broad, and it used to be grouped under a different taxonomy group, and now as we are seeing these aggressive strains attacking strawberries or other fruits, they're kind of teasing out which group does this belong to.
I'm thinking more in adjacent weed species.
Actually, a researcher in my lab is conducting research on anthracnose, jumping from weeds to strawberry plants, and she has also isolated some neopest from weeds. I don't know if there is a direct relation, but that is just something that she has recently presented and I personally thought was interesting.
Yeah, well, that's unique. My little pea brain said, well, you know, how can we spread this around? What is the spore viability in the soil? In other words, what are you looking at as far as the rotation goes?
So we are collecting, or I'm collecting soil samples before planting, after the plants are taken out, and then before planting again next season, and I will be quantifying the amount of spores that I find in the soil kind of through DNA analysis and then quantitative PCR. But from my understanding, spore viability is significantly reduced when you have wet soil conditions and high temperatures. So I'm interested to see how that will play a role in neopest survivability throughout the field. And
Just thinking about rotation.
we are definitely going to be using the same field as well, so I can tell if there's a buildup, for example, from our first year to our second year. So I can have some more information on that as time progresses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Guy.
Curious, as Neopest, it sounds like it's always been here. Have we just mutated a virulent strain that's spreading, or what's your thought on that?
I can't say that we mutated it, but you are correct. This is not a new issue. Before it was Neopestalotiopsis, it was under the genre of Pestalotiopsis, which I believe sometime in the 90s in Florida was found to also be pathogenic on strawberries. But it kind of died down and went away. Maybe it just wasn't proliferated at that point. I'm not really sure why it hasn't always been very severe and aggressive, but maybe with the change in climate and the change of weather patterns, it's able to spread further, and conditions are just more optimal for it to proliferate and be aggressive. Does that answer your question?
Sure, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
When you were looking at your varietal resistance, were you looking at prevalence on the plants, or were you looking on severity on the leaves? What were you differentiating there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not exactly. So I don't have a set scale of 0 to 10 on severity, but I'm looking at kind of the accumulation of symptoms, so leaf death or leaf spots that are on the leaves, stunting of the plant, and I'm using that in combination to see, am I having more symptomatic plants with this cultivar, or am I having more symptomatic plants in this cultivar? So that's kind of how I'm differentiating things. It's more of a, are symptoms there, and not so much as a how severe are the symptoms, because I didn't want to make any incorrect judgments. There are a lot of leaf spot symptoms associated with a lot of pathogens. So until I could have some kind of actual quantification that it is actually Neopest causing those symptoms, I'm just kind of more so looking at where are symptoms present and where aren't they present. And I will head out on that one. Thank you.